It's just it's just wild how the Israeli government continually tries to use human shields as a justification for killing innocent people. Just because Hamas has people held hostage and used as human shields by pretending to be civilians, that doesn't give a government the right to kill civilians. I mean, imagine if somebody took your family members hostage and was held up in a building, and then the government came in and just bombed that house. Nobody would be okay with that happening. Killing the hostages to get to the bad guys doesn't make you the good guys. It means you're willing to kill anybody and everybody.
Joining us now, Elan Levy. He is the Israeli government spokesperson. Welcome back and thank you for your time. I was listening to the remarks by the Israeli Minister of Defense moments ago, Yoav Gallant, and he said of the complexities of war that there are challenges right now for the IDF. What are those challenges specifically now in day 72 of fighting Hamas?
Well, probably one of the biggest challenges for the IDF is how do they distinguish Israeli hostages from Hamas, because they seem to be unable to distinguish who's a innocent civilian hostage to a terrorist and willing to kill hostages because the IDF killed three of them, even though they were yelling for help in Hebrew.
Israel is dealing with a tremendously difficult battlefield since Hamas has spent the last 16 years deliberately embedding itself underneath schools, under homes, under mosques, and under hospitals. And the Americans have spoken about this as well, that Israel faces an incredible challenge trying to target the Hamas terrorists when they are deliberately hiding behind civilians and have spent all their years in power building their military machine under.
Okay, so the Israeli government knows where these tunnels are. They've infiltrated some of them. They've blown up a few of the entrances. Why don't they just go throughout the tunnels and try to find the hostages? If they just go throughout the tunnels, then they're just fighting Hamas people, and those that aren't fighting back are either people surrendering or hostages, and they could easily get this done and over with. Instead, they're just indiscriminately bombing people, killing French diplomats and people um and in churches. They're killing the media and stuff. So what they're doing is actually not solving anything.
The civilian areas. Just now on your screen, you're showing the incredible tunnel system that Hamas built underneath the Gaza Strip. It's as wide as a subway tunnel. That's how big it is, and that's how much concrete Hamas diverted from the people of Gaza towards its terror machine. So as we go after the monsters who perpetrated the October 7th massacre, we have to do everything we can to get civilians out of harm's way, even though Hamas is deliberately trying to hide behind them, because Hamas's whole strategy.
Okay, so how does indiscriminately bombing Gaza and the West Bank getting civilians out of harm's way? How does burying people underneath rubble getting people out of harm's way? How does going to UN schools and shelters and executing kids getting civilians out of harm's way? It is wild the lies that the uh, Israeli spokespeople like to spew.
Strategy is based on human shields. They're trying to maximize casualties on their own side to generate international sympathy, to generate diplomatic pressure in the hope that that will make us stop and they'll get away with the 10/7 massacre.
It was breathtaking.
Okay, then why are you falling into the hands of Hamas by killing innocent people, indiscriminately bombing Gaza and the West Bank, or using tanks to attack the media, like what happened in Lebanon when a tank struck a journalist and his other people twice with a tank attack, killed one journalist and injured several others. Like, come on, can you stop with the lies here?
Taking to see one of the mothers of the 3 hostages that were killed on Friday at the funeral over the weekend. I know you've seen this as well and share in the heartbreak. How have those deaths caught in friendly fire changed the approach on the ground? What are the conversations around that?
Israeli society is shocked and traumatized. This should never have happened. These 3 young men should have been brought home safely, and this was a tragic and horrific mistake.
Yeah, it should have never happened, but because the IDF likes to indiscriminately shoot anybody and everybody, it happened. They don't care if somebody is surrendering, they're going to consider them a threat and kill them. They don't care if they're speaking in Hebrew, waving a white flag, asking for help, they're going to kill them. That's why the IDF leader had to come out on media and be like, yeah, we don't kill innocent people, not even Gazans if they're surrendering. That's not what you're supposed to do. He had to tell the IDF not to kill innocent people.
The hostage issue is a very personal issue for Israel. 250 hostages in a country of only 10 million people means everyone knows someone who was abducted, and many Israelis like me are walking around with this dog tag, just like John Kirby did at his press conference. It says, "Bring them home now." And in Hebrew, "Our hearts are trapped in Gaza." Now, our policy to get the hostages back, because time is running out for them, is to continue putting unrelenting military pressure on Hamas, because that is the only thing that will force Hamas to release hostages. It happened the
But it doesn't work because that's what the Israeli government has been doing, and so far no hostages has been released. Though in the ceasefires, hostages have been released. So it just goes to show that if there's a ceasefire, uh, there will be more hostages that get released. That's what the hostages constantly talk about when they talk about what the Hamas people want. They want a ceasefire, and they say that they will be released if there is a ceasefire.
last time. We had a hostage release pause. In exchange for giving us back women and children, Hamas wanted a pause for a few days in the fighting. They gave us hostages. We gave them a few days of a breather. And then Hamas decided to resume rocket fire at Israel and not to return all the women and children as they had been promising. So our chief of staff in the army has made it very clear what the rules of engagement are, the caution that our soldiers have to take in a very complicated battlefield where Hamas is constantly trying to lure our soldiers into ambushes in dense urban fighting. And we're
Okay, yeah, just because Hamas is trying to lure people into traps doesn't mean you get to kill innocent people.
going to continue putting military pressure on Hamas. We are committed to that pledge as a state, as a government, and as a nation. There will be no one left behind.
And the longer it goes without the hostages being released and Hamas's inability to negotiate and continue on the path of destruction as they have, does that indicate to you the well-being of the hostages is in question? We know every day matters, that how many are...
I mean, how can you know if the well-beings of the hostages are, in good condition when the Israeli government is letting that the hostages could be in, or just, killing hostages that are asking for help after they escape. I mean, the concern of hostages dying by the Israeli government has been brought up several times due to the indiscriminate killings by the Israeli government.
are still alive?
Of course, the well being of the hostages is the top priority for us. We already know from testimonies of survivors of the Hamas terror dungeons of the physical abuse, the psychological abuse, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse that some of the hostages have suffered there without medical.
Yeah, that is just horrible. I mean, torturing people is just horrible. It is definitely a war crime, and nobody's going to support that. But we can't ignore the fact that the Israeli government does the same thing with Palestinians. They will kidnap kids and torture them either physically or emotionally, and the Israeli government should be considered terrorists just as much as Hamas because they both use the same tactics.
medication, having complex injuries, being treated without anesthetic by a vet in the best case circumstances. There's a hostage in there who had an arm blown off during the atrocities of October 7th, and Hamas isn't giving access to the Red Cross. And the Red Cross is not pressuring Hamas in order to see them. So everyone here in Israel is sick with worry for the fate of the hostages, and Hamas has been torturing them. Just think of poor Yarden Bibas, 34 years old. His wife and 2 children were abducted, and they're still there. Hamas claims that they're dead, and Hamas filmed a sick psychological propaganda video telling this poor man that his children had been killed, only to see him break down on camera. We're sick with worry for them, and we're demanding immediate access for the Red Cross so they can get...
I mean, is the Israeli government truly worried about the hostages when they're willing to kill hostages that escape or kill hostages still trapped in tunnels by flooding them? I mean, if they're looking to kill Hamas by flooding tunnels, it is quite possible that the flooded tunnels will kill the hostages as well.
Get medical treatment before their immediate and unconditional return home.
I'm glad you brought
that. And by the way, we know that at least 20 of them have been murdered as well. Of those 129 hostages, at least 20 have since been murdered in captivity.
I appreciate that you brought up the Bibas family, those 2 little boys.